You're on the live stream. So
Yeah.
wait, you want me not to talk, or are you
Wait.
muted?
check.
Yeah. Running into the world.
Oh yeah, this is okay. Yeah, this is the live stream.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Did they put a few people on, or?
Not yet. But sometimes it counts. Okay. Next well.
I mean, the majority of people that live here will come.
look like you're very serious today. You've got a tie on.
everyone wants to take a seat, we're going to have a couple speeches in a minute.
She wants us to remind people there's food. But I can do that at the end.
Can we start?
You want me to write while we're talking?
Right when I talk.
And purple red? And purple red?
Hi. For those who don't know us, we are two of Larry's kids. I'm Katie and this is Jamie. First, we want to thank everyone for coming today to celebrate our dad, and thank everyone who's reached out in the last week or so, whether it's friends, colleagues, fellow sports enthusiasts, and former students. When deciding how to honor and celebrate our dad today, we knew it had to be a bit more of a party and a little less somber than the funeral home, because that wasn't really Dad's vibe. So today we want to just tell some stories about the man that he was. And when we're done, we have a few extra people who are going to talk, and if anyone else wants to get up, you are more than welcome.
So Larry was born in Pembroke on July 17th, 1952, but spent most of his young life living in Deep River with his teacher parents, Lawrence and Keitha, and his sister Alice. He was a preemie, like me, but it never held him back in life. When he was born, his doctor told our granny that it was a big world to grow in, and there was lots of space. So not to fret, that he had as much of a chance for success as anyone else. He developed a love of sport, throwing a ball around with our Gramps. At an early age, Dad understood that sports were a great way to bond with others and to make friends. He was always sure to include all of the neighborhood kids in a game of ball. He developed skills and life lessons along the way, playing football and basketball in high school. He attended the University of Ottawa and achieved his Bachelor of Physical Education, followed by his Bachelor of Education at Queen's University, graduating in 1975. Dad's first teaching job brought him to Kirkland Lake. Later that year, as a phys ed teacher at KLCVI. He took great pleasure in also coaching sports, particularly football, which was one of his favorites.
His life would forever change when, by the ladies' room door at the Franklin Hotel, he met our mother. Dad was out socializing with a close colleague, Pat DeSano, on a random weeknight. Mom was freshly off an afternoon shift at the hospital where she worked. One conversation led to another, and a relationship was born. Dad took Mom home to meet his parents. Upon arrival in Deep River, Mom was very confused to be meeting his grandparents. Not realizing that they were in fact his parents, they just started a little later in life. Unbeknownst to our mother, my granny asked Dad what Mom's favorite meal was to make for their first visit. Granny came out with a spread consisting of Salisbury steak and all the fixings. Mom turned to my dad and said, "What is this?" The truth being that Dad wanted Salisbury steak and told Granny that it was her favorite, so she would make it for him, even though she probably would have anyway. Dad also told Granny that because Mom was Catholic and it was Easter weekend, she couldn't eat meat on Good Friday, so Granny presented a delicious salmon loaf, which is not something my mom would have enjoyed.
Despite this introduction, after a year-long relationship, they decided to get engaged. A year later, in 1979, they were married here in Kirkland Lake on Mom's birthday, August 4th. We always joked that Dad picked the date so he couldn't forget both their anniversary and her birthday, or he'd really be in the doghouse. It was mostly a great year. However, Dad lost his teaching position in June of 1979 due to cutbacks. He temporarily took a job at the post office before finding a position at Adams Mine. He would end up working there for 10 years before returning to teaching, his true passion.
For the record, this wasn't my line. Mom and Dad were blessed with 3 amazing and humble children, starting with Jamie, followed by Ian, and then me, the baby. Having been a teacher, naming the children was not an easy task, and quite the ordeal for my mom. Many names which were suggested by my mom were vetoed by Dad because they reminded him of bad former students, and other names were vetoed by my mom for being overly Scottish. Cue in one of Dad's weird obsessions. So by happenstance, Jamie and Ian's names equaled exactly 23 letters, all combined with the middle name. So when I came around, my name had to equal 23 letters, including middle names. It took quite a while for them to pick something that worked. My dad knew the value of hard work and didn't shy away from it, as I'm sure a lot of his coworkers can attest to. But before becoming a teacher, he spent summers doing a range of jobs such as grave digging, and even worked at CFB Petawawa in a variety of roles. He liked driving the big trucks. These are just a few of the experiences that formed Dad's work ethic and dedication, and much to my mom's consternation, it's a trait that he passed along to all of his kids as well. Oh, you really did give me a long speech. If Dad wasn't at least half an hour early for work before the school opened, he considered himself late. When he wasn't coaching sports, his first priority after school was having a nap. This is not the right page.
It is. That's page 3.
Okay. You missed this section. Anyway, sorry. For a physical education teacher, health and nutrition was, of course, at the top of Dad's list of concerns for everyone but him. Dad had an ever-present junk food drawer at his desk, which consisted of snack cakes, puddings, cookies, chocolate bars. He could sit down 20 minutes before dinner and eat an entire sleeve of soda crackers with butter, or an entire bag of potato chips. He was fond of a mixing bowl-sized serving of cereal and would eat hot dogs every day if you let him. But above all else, nearly every day, my dad would head up to the kitchen nearly an hour and a half after he went to bed to get himself a snack, which consisted of 3 peanut butter or peanut butter and creamed honey sandwiches, would equal 2.5 at the end by the time he went, and my mom stole half, but this was a daily occurrence. So when I say we went through a lot of bread, it was a lot of bread. Dad was always dedicated to the work that he did with people, but we still think it would come as a shock to him to see how many people and lives he affected. The amount of messages we've been getting is just unreal. Though he'd been known to brag jokingly about how wonderful he was, he really was quite humble and down to earth and would not have expected that he touched as many lives as he did. Phrases like, reflecting over the years, I realized the impact your teaching had on me, or I don't know what I would have done without you, or he has played an instrumental role in who I am as a human being and I am forever grateful, are huge testaments to the kind of man and teacher he was, and those are comments that were sent to us this week. The thing about Dad that made him a good teacher or a coach is that he cared about each and every student he had. He respected the ones that tried, and even more so the ones that failed but got back up again. He could often tell when students were struggling and did what he could in his role to give them the support that they needed to get through it. He cared about more than just students' grades. He cared about giving them the tools for success in life and cared about their overall well-being. He was a perfect fit in the role of department head because he enjoyed scheduling all of the sporting events and ordering materials, but we always joked that he probably knew exactly how many basketballs there were in the school. When I was in my last year of high school, I was on Students' Council. We were holding our annual Christmas formal in the gym at KLCVI. Now, anyone who knew him knew that the gym was like his baby. We transformed that gym into a beautiful deep-sea dream, cover to cover. Most people didn't realize that I had to vet almost everything we did. Hey, Dad, can we hang rope from one basketball net to the other? Hey, Dad, is it okay if we tape stuff to the bleachers? We had built an archway for people to walk through when they came into the gym, but it wouldn't hold still, and we didn't want it to fall on anyone coming through the door. So we were trying to figure out what to do, and next thing you know, Bruce Sandrin comes walking down the hall with a power drill. And I said, what you doing? And he's like, I'm just going to put a few screws to hold it in place. And I was like, no, you're not. I have to live with him. So I was like, he likes that floor better than he likes me. After 15 minutes of going back and forth, he stopped listening and just drilled the holes into the floor anyway. And I said, to anyone who would listen, if he asks, I had nothing to do with this, you're telling him.
One of our favorite stories about Dad and his students relates to him being pretty lenient with them. If he set an assignment and you didn't have it ready by the end of class or the end of day deadline, he offered a very particular extension. Your paper would be due in our mailbox at home at the house by midnight. But if you made our dog bark, you failed. In the morning, papers could be found in the mailbox, on the back porch, hanging off the car. Even if the dog barked, though, he never failed anyone. Well, at least not for that reason. Dad did his best to make classes fun. Gym class wasn't just gym class. He had special challenges and projects he liked to have for students. He also sometimes liked to trip up his students. He'd make them run outside for several kilometers, but what his students didn't know was that he had a spy. Our grandmother, who lived on Government Road, she would relay back to Dad about who did and did not pass by her house on the runs. Many students could never figure out how he always managed to know when people were cheating. He was also very big on not multiple choice, but multiple guess questions, because it wasn't choose the right answer, it was choose the most right answer. Because it'd be A, B, C, D. A, B, C might all be right, but which is the most right? I think one of the classes he enjoyed the most was his exercise science class. It allowed him to teach in his element, but also have some fun and unique assignments, such as creating and marketing your own energy drink, or creating a moving body part with joints and ligaments. He would often excitedly tell us about his favorite ones. Years later, former students would tell him how useful this class was in prepping them for some of their university courses. Dad absolutely loved his career at KLCVI and KLDCS over the span of 31 years. When he first started teaching, they would have several big parties throughout the year, including a huge meet and greet for new and old teachers come September. Dad always loved these parties, particularly having moved to a new community where he didn't know anybody. He loved watching students grow over their 4 years in high school and become amazing things like doctors, lawyers, and fellow teachers. He drew inspiration from his colleagues and did his best to teach them what he could in return. Dad talked about retiring for years before he did. First we would hear, "I think this will be my last year." We'd ask why, and he'd say, "I just had the worst grade 9 class of my career." This went on for about 3 or 4 years. Always saying he'd had the worst class, year after year. Some students would say, "You can't retire until I graduate." We knew it wouldn't be much longer, however, when he started getting the grandkids of his original students. Fast forward a few years later, and he officially retired in 2017. It didn't take him long to come back to the school as a supply teacher, in part because Mom said he was home too much. He couldn't get rid of his love of the school, his fellow teachers, and the students. He always said he'd stop teaching when the last grade 9 class was done. He continued supply teaching until last year. Dad bled maroon and white, and he certainly tried to emulate KLCVI's motto, wisdom, integrity, and skill, in everything he did representing the school. He never forgot a student, but you could always tell which ones he was closest to. Running into them downtown, it was a difference of a hello with a name, or a long conversation about how life was going.
In his retirement, such as it was, Dad got to do a lot of things that he loved, one of the main ones being golfing. He hadn't really had the opportunity to do that much while still teaching because my mom had way too many summer jobs for him to do. He spent the last few years trekking to the golf course and hitting the greens with his little golf posse. He developed an affinity for watching reality TV shows like Storage Wars, Lone Star Law, and cooking shows on the Food Network, much to everyone's surprise, as he was kind of a simple meat and potatoes kind of guy. If I was making a salad out of spring mix, he would often pull out parts and say, "Why does this look like grass?" I was like, "Dad, that's arugula. It's healthy. You should eat it." Dad came to Mom one day and asked if he should join the gold miners executive, and her answer was a resounding yes, because it would keep him busy in his retirement. He really enjoyed getting out of the house, socializing with the boys, and being able to participate and watch hockey on the regular, most likely without interruptions from his family members. In a reversal of roles, I became Dad's chauffeur, so he could join the rest of the executive at Mike Jones' place or the Fed for drinks after the game. Figured it was fair trade because he drove me around a lot, me and my friends around a lot when we were younger. Dad loved games. We always had a wide variety of board games at the house growing up, many of which were trivia-based. Trivial Pursuit was always a family favorite. We had about 6 different versions, including Star Wars, Pop, 90s, and Dad's favorite, sports, which we always vetoed because he knew the answer to every single question. Dad loved nearly every sport you could imagine and could basically recite where every sport team was founded, where they moved to, and know which team every single player played for their entire career. My nephew Caden has stated many times that he felt Grandpa should have been on Jeopardy! He also always finished his crosswords in pen with little to no mistakes, words that I think most of us have never heard of. The same could not be said for helping his kids with their homework. For a teacher, you would expect him to help correct mistakes, not add them. But not long into high school, we realized that Mom would be doing the proofreading, not Dad. Dad, being a lover of sport, tried to encourage his kids in sport as well. He signed Jamie and Ian up for soccer, but they didn't really take to it, one spending most of his time picking clovers out of the grass rather than actually playing. We all had a variety of different interests over the years, but I did mention to my dad last year that I really should be his favorite because I have the most interest in sport and our shared love of baseball. He turned to me and said, "Well, your hobbies do interest me the most." I started playing ball around the age of 9. A few years later, Dad took over our team as a coach, and a lot of my former teammates and friends are here from our Bulls days when we were kids. A few years after that, he helped take over the entire league, which had shrunk a little bit over the years, but we still managed to have 2 teams that played a couple times a week. So when I decided to try my hand at pitching, my dad said, "Okay," so we'd take some of us to the gym after hours, and we would practice pitching in the gym. And when he was, doing schoolwork, he'd let me practice my layups in the gym, so I got a little more practice than the average person. Fast forward a few years later, and our women's league was in need of umpires. So who do I turn to but my dad? He umped in our league for almost 20 years. With so many women and so many opinions, it was not always an easy task. But he could give as good as he got. And between umpiring in women's ball and refereeing in a variety of sports over his teaching career, I imagine that he got yelled at by a lot of parents and players.
There were, however, a few things that always made Dad uneasy. He was extremely afraid of heights, barely able to climb 2 rungs on a ladder, even shaking when others climbed for him. I can recall a time when I was up painting the side of the 2nd floor of our house, and Dad was on the ground holding the ladder steady for me. At least, that's what the plan was. As I climbed up the ladder, it began to shake and sway as if there was an earthquake happening. In reality, Dad was just vibrating so much on the ground, so intensely from watching me climb. We commented last night that it was amazing he had his fear of heights, but he was still able to climb up on the umpire stand while he was doing volleyball games at the high school with no problem. I guess the love of sport overrode the fear of heights. He always said he wasn't afraid of water, but despite living around the corner from a beach, he rarely made use. His grandkids had much better luck getting him in the water than we did when we were children. Dad would be happy to sit on the beach reading, manning the hibachi grill, or glaring at anyone who walked by our stuff. He was also a terrible traveler. His fears of heights was not conducive to flying. Mom was actually worried that they wouldn't actually make their honeymoon when they got married. Road trips weren't much better, as he didn't handle heavy traffic, all that well either. And he wasn't much of a handyman, to the extent that we began to worry when we heard he was going to be doing something around the house. Whether it was follow through on a DIY project, Mom's still waiting on the picnic table that he started building her back when we lived on Grierson. Though the wine rack he was making more recently did near completion, or fix-it projects around the house, we had to be watchful. One incident in particular comes to mind when Dad took it upon himself to install some shelves in our basement rec room. They were being put in right near the water main that was coming into the house from the street. So when Mom had to leave briefly to go take care of something else, she warned him to be careful. Watch for the pipe. Dad waved her off and she left him alone. He then proceeded to drill into the pipe. So he put his finger in the hole as the water began to spray out. Unfortunately, the hole in the pipe was on the town's side of the house's shutoff. So Dad had to keep it plugged until the works department showed up to turn off the water, which only happened after Mom had an argument with them over the location of the actual shutoff outside. Did I mention that this was in a cold March and the icy water was freezing his hand this whole time also? Having 3 kids head off to university meant many instances of having to creatively pack the car. This was not a skill that my father possessed. His usual refrain being, "It's not all gonna fit," followed by Mom saying, "Get one of the kids." His experience with Dr. Mario didn't translate it into Tetrising the trunk of a minivan. It never failed that when leaving the driveway, and Dad behind, he somberly approached the vehicle with a great grimace on his face, and with great seriousness would give us the talk, which mostly consisted of telling us to drive safe, no speeding, and don't get any tickets. This was important to Dad because he was forever haunted by the lone speeding ticket that he got in his life, which, according to him, was all Mom's fault. From then on, he normally drove at least 10 kilometers per hour under the speed limit, much to the annoyance of everybody else.
Especially those who are running late to get somewhere.
We would usually start backing up out of the driveway before he finished talking with him, chasing us down the driveway.
So Lorraine Montague can attest to this, but my dad never met a dog he didn't like. With farming background on both sides of his family, having a dog was natural. He had them most of his life. Friends and family often brought their dogs for visits, which always brought him a lot of joy. Growing up, we had 2 Dalmatians who ate like kings. Our second Dalmatian, Phoenix, was described by a vet as looking like an aircraft carrier. That was largely in part because he ate better than most people. My dad would buy him his own T-bone steak. He would feed him cookies, cake, macaroni and cheese, whatever we were having, to the point that the dog learned to open the fridge and steal his own food. Dad loved dogs so much that he was convinced that when his wedding ring went missing years ago, the kids must have taken it, never once considering that the dog ate it. But sure enough, there's Dad in the backyard a day later with a stick searching for his ring. In our lifetime, we only saw Dad's barely there upper lip twice. Once during a summer vacation when he attempted to quit smoking, and later in conjunction with a November campaign at the school. We couldn't believe it when Dad agreed to shave his mustache if the students raised enough money. Not only did they raise enough, they exceeded it. And he was a good sport, shaved it off in front of staff and students. When he got home that night, my mom said, "You better grow that back as soon as possible." He was proud and passionate and considerate and supportive. He could be tough, but he was fair. He had a goofy sense of humor, sometimes almost childish. Poop and fart jokes were some of his favorites, something he and my nephew had in common. When trying to get a rise out of one of his children, their friends, or maybe even students, and my poor friend Lindsay was the brunt of this a lot, my dad had mastered what we like to call poke foo. So it consisted of Dad sneaking up behind you and poking you with his index finger, which was like steel. Anyone who had this inflicted upon them can attest to the shock and pain of it all. And we often joke that he must not have had friends growing up because I swear he just sat at home practicing poking his finger against a wall. We often joke that Dad dressed like an old man before he was one. Looking back at some of our photos, I'm like, he was wearing old-fashioned sweaters when he was, 35 or 25. I'm like, I don't know where that came from. He also owned a golf shirt in nearly every color of the rainbow. A couple years ago, he wanted a forest green golf shirt. My mom and I looked in every store you could possibly imagine for a forest green golf shirt, and we could not find one. It took us 2.5 years, and I think he wore it once. But he treated our home like a home for wayward children, with all of our friends welcome at any time, and my friends definitely took advantage of that fact. This consisted of playing games, talking, watching sports, and introducing them to my dad's vast liquor collection. His decision, not ours. My dad loved his family, and particularly his grandkids. He would do anything for his grandkids except travel. If they wanted an indoor camping tent, Dad would make it happen. If they wanted a maze in the snow, Dad would spend hours shoveling a path through the yard. He would load them up with scrambled eggs, toast, pancakes, French toast, or waffles, depending on what they wanted. And if the grandkids would be coming, he would venture to the basement to collect the toys. Though sometimes Dad's grandparenting style consisted of him reading or napping while Treehouse was watching the kids.
The truth is, both of my kids had him wrapped around their little fingers. We could go on, and it probably still wouldn't be long enough to tell you all the things that we want to or could tell you about Larry McKay. Even though we're devastated he's gone, we're comforted and so thankful for the overwhelming love and support we've seen for him this week, and knowing that he finally gets to be reunited with his sweet granddaughter, Siobhan. We often joke in the family that Dad had 3 kids, but he also had a bonus daughter. Good friend of the family, used to babysit us, and just got absorbed into us. Tanis Bukowski. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to be here today, but she did deputize another prominent figure in the community, her father Yo, to provide some words on her behalf. So I'd like to invite now Yo to come up and share some memories.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yo Bukowski. I feel it an honor to be here to share and to read this beautiful letter to the wonderful McKay family from my daughter, Tanis. Lise, Caitlin, Jamie, and Ian, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a few words today as we say a final goodbye to Larry. There are friends, there are family, and then there are friends who become family. Who knew that a call from me to babysit Jamie, Ian, and Katie in 1988 would turn into a 35-year friendship, and such a special bond would develop between all of us. I have been fortunate to have the love and support of my own family, with the added bonus of experiencing a similar love and support from the McKay family. Because Larry was like a family member to me. His loss has left a void in my heart that can't be filled. But the memories we shared and the lessons I learned from him, I will forever carry with me. Larry was not just a friend, but a mentor to many of us. He taught me about tenacity, the importance of following through with my goals and always working to my true potential. Giving up was never an option. With Larry, he passed importance on focusing on your future and carving out your path. Larry was knowledgeable, insightful, sometimes a hard ass, but constantly he was the voice of reason that made you feel like everything was going to be all right. Larry was a man of integrity with a deep commitment to his family, his profession, and to his students. Again, not always fuzzy or fluffy with his words, but a man whose actions spoke volumes. Whether as a teacher or a personal friend, he was always there to celebrate our biggest victories and stand by us in times of struggle or hurt. As serious as Larry can be, he was equally as much fun. If there is one thing I have cherished sharing with Larry, Lise, Katie, Ian, and Jamie, it is the laughter. Laughter that brings you tears, laughter and conversation lasting hours, laughter that has helped to get you through these heavy days. Larry and his family have been through a lot this past year, but this is not where, but this is not where any of us wanted to see this journey end. His loss touched us all, but you know, he would not want us sitting here feeling sad. Like the coach and umpire he was, he would be blowing his whistle and telling us to get back in the game, to keep going and to play hard. Larry will always be a part of us, forever missed, but forever in our hearts. Words cannot express how grateful I am to have him as a teacher, a friend, and someone who has been like family. Thank you. Love, Tanis.
Thank you so much, Yo, and through you to Tanis. I'd like now to invite, a former colleague of my father's, Chad Mowbray, up to share some memories.
Thank you, Lise, Jamie, Ian, and Caitlin for having this opportunity to share some words on behalf of Larry. I consider myself fortunate to have met Larry when I first started teaching in KLCVI way back in the year 2000. Larry always had a friendly hello and a word of advice. At KLCVI, I distinctly remember a story of Larry not being very happy during Drug and Alcohol Awareness Week. The story started several months before when Jamie thought that he would emulate another student doing fishtails around corners on the road. At this time, Jamie was driving his grandmother's blue Ford Escort with, I think it was Colin O'Connor and maybe Janin Moran, I think. And unbeknownst to Jamie, it was inherently easier to fishtail with a rear-wheel drive car, which the Escort was not. Jamie proceeded to hit the ditch and roll the car, and the car was totaled. Jamie was quoted as saying, "Oh my God, my dad's gonna kill me. He's gonna kill me." Larry showed up, and really the group was expecting the infamous Larry tirade. You know that look when he cocks his head to the side and the brow furrows, and you're like, here it comes? But that's not what Larry did. He checked to make sure everyone was all right. You know, that's what Larry cared about, is that everyone was all right. And he took care of everybody. He tried to make sure that people were all right. And his bark was much worse than his bite. He deeply cared about everyone that he worked with, the students that he served, and the family and the community. Fast forward a few months during Drug and Alcohol Awareness Month, Larry arrives at school to see the wrecked blue Ford Escort in front of the gym doors with the message, "Don't drink and drive." Larry was livid, thinking that people would think Jamie was drinking and driving. I remember Larry walking up into the office with that look, cocking the head sideways, the brows going up. He had a bunch of papers in his hand. He put them down on the desk and like, oh, here it comes. But you learn to get through it with Larry, and it was coming from a good place. This time, we did get the Larry tirade, but I do remember him walking into the office and being thankful that we were there as staff supporting students and that he had the ability to support students. As a young administrator at KLCVI and KLDCS, things didn't always go as planned. And Larry would often stop by after a difficult staff meeting or a department head meeting or one of those infamous PA days, and Larry would say, "You did a good job. We just like to make things difficult." Larry was always there to support, and he said, "Don't give up." Thinking of Tanis's words, "Get back in the game," was a fond message from Larry. And he would often slip a kind word, or he'd leave a little note about leadership or a quote about teamwork to help encourage you on. I truly appreciated Larry's support in this regard. He was forever the coach. But he did like to joke and prank. It took me a while to catch on to some of these. One day early on, Larry came into my office with a bunch of bananas and asked me if I wanted any. I said, "Sure, I like bananas." Then the next semester, around the same time, same offer would come out with bananas. Second year, another offer would come out with bananas. I started to go, why does Larry always have these extra bananas? Then it clued in. It was during sexual health awareness. And he was teaching students how to put on condoms, and there were extra bananas. I'm sure Larry smiles to this day with a huge grin over sharing those bananas. Larry was also extremely proud of his gym. And especially once we moved into KLDCS, he would fiercely protect those floors. You guys have no idea. We had to purchase the special vinyl flooring on these gigantic vinyl rolls that were 6 feet wide. And after a Christmas formal, I remember hearing Larry coming down the hallway, "Bachman!" And he was just irate. And you see, Aaron Buckman had set up for Christmas formal, but didn't know how to roll the vinyl floor back up, and she left Larry a nice little note. Anyways, Larry really did care about those floors and about that gym. All kidding aside, Larry cared deeply about relationships with students, family, friend, and staff. He gave an immense amount of his time to foster those relationships through coaching, working in education. Whether it was refereeing, coaching, teaching, Larry's contribution to the team, and he encouraged everyone else to do so, to contribute to that team, to give their best. He truly believed and modeled that he could accomplish so much more as a team than as individuals. Thank you for those lessons, Larry. One more. Go Devils, go.
Thank you, Chad. I'd now like to invite Ali Pollock to come up.
I should have been closer. I am here because I love Larry as a friend and a mentor. And sometimes he wasn't always easy to love. But a true mentor and friend to many. But I'm also here because of Aaron. And Aaron was asked to say a few words on behalf of the teaching world. A little bit, and many of you know, my partner in crime. Aaron, that is, not Larry. And Larry knew this. But Erin so wanted to be here, but unfortunately she is at a different funeral, her uncle's funeral in Collingwood. So she asked me to say a few words. And hopefully I can do it justice, because we know Erin is the speaker. Erin is the one that should be here, and Erin is the one that takes over the room. So this is Erin. I'm incredibly sorry that I can't be there in person today to honor a friend and colleague, but I'm grateful to his family for allowing me to visit last week and say goodbye. To Lise, Caitlin, Jamie, and Ian, I am sending you much love and strength as you navigate this loss, and hope that today, through the grief, you also find gratitude for a life that was well lived. Some of you knew him as coach, ref, Mr. McKay, Larzo, Larry Bear, or simply as Larry, but I'm sure many of us called him by many other colorful names. But to us, Larry was a stubborn colleague at times, a sports fan, a paper hoarder, a detailed spreadsheet creator. I've experienced that firsthand, a dedicated coach and referee, and an incredible, loyal, and kind friend. Larry was the kind of person who could make you swear out of pure frustration, then laugh at how ridiculous the situation was, and then you would cry because of his genuine kindness and concern for you. Despite his best efforts to drive us away with his bark, Allie and I quickly saw beyond the unruly mustache to Larry's massive heart. Whether it was helping us to set up for a fundraiser in the gym, a quick bitch session in the office, a Friday night beer, or a debrief after a game, Larry was always there. I'd like to say he was there to help us, but it was usually to tell us how we were damaging the gym floors. Regardless, he was there with his mischievous smile and that little glint in his eye that let us know that he was proud of the work we were doing. Larry's pride in others, his family, his students, his players, his colleagues, was matched by his genuine interest in our lives. He always asked about our children, our weekend, our dogs, and would gently offer advice, a shared know that he cared. Being an educator was never just a job to Larry. He valued the impact of working with youth and modeled what it meant to be in service of others. One of our fondest memories, and I dare say a little bit bragging rights here, was fundraising nearly $5,000 for Movember and watching Larry shave off his mustache in front of the entire school. Something we immediately regretted. This is Aaron, because Larry without a mustache was not a sight to behold. And this is also Aaron. The man had no upper lip. So in honor of Larry's, and this is a little side, infamous stash, we hope that you will join the KLDCS team, who will once again participate in Movember and raise money for cancer in Larry's honor. We are planning a basketball game to raise more funds for a scholarship in his name at the end of November, where we hope to see many mustaches and referee whistles, and where we can come together to celebrate his career and many lives he touched. Larry was and is and will continue to be a part of KLDCS. I mean this literally, because one can't go into the back coach's room and Aaron and not smell the cigarettes. He thought he did it. I was not going to rat Larry out on this one, but I did. A little bit there, we could smell it. But he is also a part of every single one. But he is also a part of every single one of us, because his dedication, even in retirement, to his KLCVI, KLDCS family never wavered. Every one of us can picture Larry, truly, walking home after coaching or reffing a game, his bag slung over his shoulder, his casual stride up Allen Avenue, his friendly wave as he declined a lift always, and an ear-to-ear grin as he replayed the game. And that's how I think Larry would want to be remembered, smiling after a good game, leaving a job he enjoyed, waving to his friends, and walking home to a family he loved. Larry will be missed, but more importantly, Larry will be remembered always. I also love the fact that there's football going on over there, and Larry would love that. Oh, go Bills.
Thank you, Allie. And
Sorry. So I asked Lorraine Montague if I could read out what she posted on the funeral home page, and she said I could. because some of you might not have known, but she was his work wife, so she had a different perspective on Dad a little bit. So she said, every now and then an extraordinary individual comes along and gives an enormous amount to their community, and Larry was one of those people. It didn't matter if it was his capacity as a teacher, a town representative, a coach, or a game official. Larry gave it his all, and as a result, KLDCS and Kirkham Lake had the best when it came from him. Larry was an exceptional teacher. He was the type of person who was always willing to give a student a second chance when they slipped up. And when he spoke of teaching, it was often with a smile and a glint in his eye, especially to students. Sorry, it's a screenshot. To students with learning disabilities. He had both patience and empathy for these students, and his kindness would shine through. He believed in their abilities despite their limitations and showed pride in their accomplishments. I was fortunate enough to work with Larry for 20 years. He and I would often start our workday together as I'd catch him walking down Allen Avenue, stop the car, and he'd appreciately hop in. Those 3 or 4 minutes were often the only chance we'd have to exchange a few words before our hectic day began. I have to tell you, Larry certainly made my job a lot easier. He was never one to bend the rules, nor did he have a double standard. He never expected something of me that he himself would not put forth. I like that in a person, super qualities to possess when teaching young minds as well. If Larry said he would do something for you, you could always depend on him to follow through. His attendance was impeccable, and his work ethic was second to none. After Larry retired and COVID made its debut, finding substitute teachers was next to impossible. Larry rarely turned me down, although golf did pose a threat from time to time. Even when the call was half an hour prior to class startup, Lees would field the numerous calls and eventually I earned the title of being Larry's work wife, a title I am now proud to own. Thank you, Lees, for your sense of humor and tolerance. Larry was a great friend and will be missed by both Gino and I.
And now I'll invite, former student, friend, and collaborator on various efforts, Tom Barker.
There's quite a few stories I can share, but there's one in particular I think that Larry would want shared today on this special day. I was in OAC, and I was given the ultimatum, either sports or work, and heading to university I chose work. Well, they were short some players on the basketball team, and Larry had mentioned that if I show up, I'm on the team. So much to my dad's chagrin, I showed up, and Larry got me practicing and on the team. But there's always one play I guess Larry had in his pocket that not too many people could pull off, and I guess he was waiting for a big sweaty guy to be able to pull this off. I was never fast, but I had a decent hook shot, and he wanted me to post down when I was super sweaty, rub up against the guy, and whisper in his ear, "I love you, man." Stunned to be able to take the shot. Sure enough, he put me in the game. He says, "Remember the play?" I said, "I remember the play." And I got down there, and sure enough, posting up, whispered to the guy after rubbing up, sweaty body, "I love you, man." And I threw the basket in. Larry was so proud, and he'd never let, every time he'd meet me after that, like, "You remember the game?" I said, "I absolutely do, and I will always cherish it." So here's to you, Coach. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. So at this point, we promised to kind of open the mic, so I'd like to invite anybody who has a memory or a story or something that they'd like to share about my dad to come up and share it if you feel comfortable. Come up, Judy.
For all of you sports-minded people, you know that my name is Judy Zwanko, and Ian has given me the honor of sitting with him today. Larry literally said from heaven, "You're overdressed," when I came in this morning, because I came in right after Mass. And I said, "Lise, do you think Larry would mind if I put on my uniform?" He said, "No, he'd love it." So I'm sporting the new colors of our Kirkland Lake Gold Miners. When I found out that Larry was now on the executive, and it goes back to the fact that Siobhan was the most brave, beautiful little granddaughter anybody could have, but Ian especially, and Jamie and Katie remember my boys who were both born with cerebral palsy. And the joy of being number 87 on First Street was not planned, but it was a gift. Because from that, Ian is a little guy. He knows what it's like not to be the healthiest dude in town. And my son Edward, when he was 16, was made an honorary member of the Kirkland Lake Legion 87s. For those of you who don't know me, before I needed this, I came to Kirkland Lake as a nursing officer, Navy. So how appropriate for Larry's stories to be told in our Legion. And all I can say to you, Ian, Katie, and Jamie, thank you for sharing your life with me, and may you rest in peace. We love you.
Do a last call around the room in case anybody else wants to come up and share.
So in true Larry style, we have a lot of food. And we're at the Legion, so we expect everyone to have a drink and celebrate our dad. But just really quick, I just want to thank, again, all the staff, students, people who have helped us out this week, even just sent messages. And if you can see all these ladies walking to the back room right now, these are all friends of mine who told us to cancel our food order and they would make all of the sandwiches themselves. So this morning they got up at the crack of dawn and they made all of the food, and we did buy some trays and stuff, but they made all of our sandwiches for us. I think that's something Dad appreciated, is when you need it, community shows up. So thank you everyone for coming. Make sure you stay and have some food because we don't want to take it all home. And have a drink to our dad. Just to close off, we do have Dolly Dykins who's just going to say a little prayer for us.
I hope you don't mind. I know the food's already been put in your mind, so I hope you're a little bit patient. Lise had asked me to say a few words as well, so I hope you would bear with me. I met Lise and their family over 7 years ago when I was doing work for the 2016 census, I believe, and Lise was our team lead, and so with the office in her home, it meant that I and the rest of our team would descend on their home several times a week to bring censuses and other required documentation. And as we got deeper in the process, it meant regular trips to your house, a lot of times after supper, and quite often it meant that I was met by Larry rather than Lise, because I don't know where you were. I know you were probably keeping score at one of Katie's ball games. Yeah, and I'm sure that it had the potential to get quite irritating to have people disrupt your home life regularly. Yet each and every time I met Larry, he would greet me with a kind smile and a gentle hello. It seemed to me that he was a very patient man. In subsequent years, it was the same whether I saw him at Foodland, a gold miners game, or the golf course. I was always greeted with that same kind smile and gentle hello, as I'm sure it was for all of you as well. Now, last fall, I needed to travel to Timmins for work, a couple of days in succession, and I couldn't find care for my dog Gia, whom I only had for about a month or so at that time. And Lise responded to a post that I had put on Facebook, and she said that they might be willing to care for her. Now, I shared with her that Gia had spent the first 3 months in a puppy mill and then 3 weeks in a home with 10 other dogs, so she had some issues, and we were working through them, and that Gia was very afraid of people. They still said, okay. And so each morning that I brought Gia to their home, it was Larry, for some reason, that had risen very early to greet us at the door and to get Gia set up in their home. It seemed, now hearing what Katie and Jamie had said, that he was used to dogs. I didn't know that at the time, but he did seem to have a way with dogs. And he was the one who would walk Gia on a leash when Gia was uncertain of doing that. And I know that my dog loved Katie and used her as a pillow or a cushion, but it was at Larry's feet that she would often sit. And Ian was a bit more scary to Gia, I think we figured out, because of his size. And so then he would get down on the floor and engage her at that level. You were all very, very kind to her, so thank you for that. In the last week, I read a number of comments from now adults who Larry had taught or coached, and the impact that he had on their lives. As someone who partook in a lot of sports as a child and teenager in the town where I grew up, I don't think we appreciated the time and the effort that coaches expended for our benefit. Time taken away from families and time not compensated. And I'm sure Larry did it because he loved it, yet I can't begin to imagine how many lives that he's positively impacted because of the time commitment and his love of sports. For many, sports is an escape from their family lives. And I understand that he also was an umpire and referee, and all I say is poor man. Kids and parents have a tendency, well, you know what they have a tendency to do. Yes, I began to know you and your family over 7 years ago, Lise, and what a 7 years it's been for you and your family. When I first met you, your family was still reeling from the loss of your granddaughter. And shortly thereafter, your mom got sick and then passed away in 2018. COVID happened, and then Larry's battle with cancer, and your dad and he dying within a day of one another. I can't imagine, can't even begin to imagine your sorrow. And so yesterday, when I was actually at your dad's funeral, I was thinking of a story of a man who lived in the 1800s. He was a devout Christian man who lived his faith and lived in following Christ, and the Bible was very important to him. He was very vibrant and active in his faith, and many of his years of life were very joyous. He was a prominent Chicago lawyer whose business was thriving. He owned several properties throughout the city. He and his wife had 4 beautiful daughters and 1 son. And so for him, life was more than good. It was very blessed. But we know that faith, no matter how great, does not spare us from adversity. So just as he hit the pinnacle of his profession and financial success, things began to change. And it began with the tragic loss of their young son. And not long after, the Great Chicago Fire destroyed nearly every real estate investment he owned. And so a couple of years ago, he decided it would be good for his wife and his daughters for him to treat them to a much needed escape from the turmoil. He sent them to Europe on a trip, on a ship, with plans to shortly join them after wrapping up some business in Chicago. And just a few days later, he received a telegram from his wife, "Save alone." Their ship had wrecked, and all 4 of his daughters perished. And on the way to meet his heartbroken wife, traveling the same sea that had just claimed his remaining children, he penned the words to a hymn that has proved to be timeless. And even if you're not a hymn lover, I suspect that you can appreciate the words of this hymn that was born out of the depths of imaginable sorrow. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. So for you and your family, Lise, I know too that your sorrow is unimaginable. And so it's my hope that this incredible story of faith has somewhat encouraged and uplifted you. Because whatever our faith is right now, I pray that in the days and months ahead that you all would draw near to God. Talk to him, yell at him if you need to. You've probably already done that. He's a big God. He can take it. Listen to him, lay bare your heart before him, and walk with him. I pray that God envelops you in his arms, draws you in, and is your comfort, strength, and peace. Faith in God through Jesus will give you the power to overcome and walk through this dark period of your life. And it's my prayer that as you deal with this considerable loss you've all experienced, that ultimately all will be well with your soul. And I'd like to close with the prayer. Let us pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for Larry's life and the influence and impact he's had on so many. Thank you for his love of family and his passion for sports. Thank you for his kindness, patience, and so much more. We pray, oh God, that you would continue to be with his family as they grieve his loss, as husband, dad, grandpa, brother, brother-in-law, uncle, teacher, coach, mentor, and friend. Surround Lise and them with your presence. Fill them with your comfort and your strength and your peace. Walk with them this day and the days ahead. We pray this all in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Thank you very much. So the food is starting to make its way out, so please go help yourselves, mingle, share thoughts and memories together, enjoy your time amongst friends.